Zach and I came across something in the New York Times which seemed incredibly radical. It's a topic that comes up a lot, and people sort of rush away scared from it. And so we welcome it as sort of opening up a new portal. On the other hand, we have some improvements and maybe a fundamentally different way of thinking about things, which Zach's going to talk about. The topic of this incredible newspaper article was how to use drugs, a university student's guide.
No, their article was called Addiction Recovery During Higher Education.
So
I came up with that cheeky title.
You kind of deconstructed some of where they were going. Is that a fair description?
Right.
They're intelligent, making smart choices simple. And of course, well, what's the smart choice when you go to college? Well, you'll never have a drink, or you'll never take amphetamines, or you'll never, is that the smart choice? What's an informed choice actually consist of? Why don't you carry their message and your variation on it from here, Zach?
Okay. Well, the article was called, well, I didn't care about it at first because their article was called Addiction Recovery During Higher Education. So already it's an article about drug use in college, but the title says recovery. So like I'm drawing this parallel to if you use drugs, you're addicted. So I changed the title to something like more, I don't know, Carl Hart-esque or Stanton Peele-esque, say how to use drugs, a university student's guide. You can't hate me for being direct. And this, as I looked at publications that as I looked at articles that this organization has written, they are trying to do something interesting. They're called Intelligent. And they say their tagline is making smart choices simple. It's an informational catalog. So what are situations that college, university students could get into? What are some choices they may have to face? And how can we give them good information? And you go down the list of topics that a university student might be interested in, and it's all pretty sensible. So I'm going to go down and I'll say, what's their take here? And what do we agree with? What don't we? And let's help them edit it. Unfortunately, the idea about drugs, the knowledge about drugs and drug effects, it's all based on the disease theory of addiction. And even though they get practical in some ways, you can tell that they're basing things on the disease theory of addiction. So let's start. I broke it into kind of three pillars here of this long article. First, they were talking about the drug use in general. It's ubiquitous. And here are some of the things that Intelligent says. College students are using drugs and alcohol, and they're using them at a higher rate than young adults of the same age who won't attend school. In other words, that's alarming, that you're going to have more people using drugs when they're going to college than people of that age who aren't going to college.
I just want to call a quick timeout.
Yep.
Already is a little confusing.
Yeah.
Because in general, privileged people go to college.
Right.
They do better in general than other people, and yet they're doing these things.
Yeah. Their second part is you can tell their slant. Substance use is risky, and it leads to other risky kinds of behavior. Okay. It would be a quote from them, and I'll take part of their line here. It would be unwise to dismiss the use of alcohol and drugs as a normal part of the college experience. In other words, let's just all acknowledge that that's what's going on. No, there's no morality to it here, no judgment. And then it says, here's how to be careful with drug use, and here's how to get help with overcoming addiction to drugs. Well, already at the onset, we would say, here is our response. We might say something like, college students use drugs and alcohol at high rates. It's a time of life that happens. People explore. But most college educated people, because people might be thinking about this, like if they're using more drugs, what does that mean? I think the LPP version might follow up with most college educated people figure out how to incorporate these substances into their lives or not at all, either during their school career or by the time they graduate, and certainly by the time that they're in the workforce and having families and things like that, probably more so than their non-educated cohort. In other words, college students may be using drugs more often, they be introduced to drugs and try them more than their non-college going peers.
And we wouldn't say it's because they're not educated. We would say because college people, they have a host of advantages. They're getting people training them. They have more money going in. They have more resources to deal with all of this.
Right. So it's a non-story. The amount of people, how many drugs are used is not interesting to me. LPP would agree that why would you dismiss the use of substances as a normal part of the college experience? But even in the first couple paragraphs, you can tell, even though they're trying to stay neutral about drug or alcohol consumption per se, they already have kind of a slant on this that says, let's all be aware that people are going to be using drugs so we can think about what to do about it. We might just say, let's be judgment free about the fact that people take substances and think more about how to get people ready to contend with those substances and incorporate them. And then we would say, here's our edit. We agree that people use substances more or less functionally and that it can be done safely, but we have a different idea about what it means to reconcile problems that are associated with drugs and alcohol, different than recovery. So that's the first part of this article that I wanted to dissect. First, before I go on, do you have reflections on that?
No, I like where we're going.
Then they start talking about drug harms and dangers. So here is intelligent. Here's some of the points that I've extracted that they wrote in the article. And I'll go, here's some good points. They say using drugs as a sole source of curing problems, and I'm paraphrasing, but using drugs as a sole source of curing problems, that's a bad way to incorporate them into life. Avoiding immediate harms related to drugs or drug taking or alcohol, like drunk driving accidents, alcohol or drug poisoning, contaminated substances, that's crucial. So that's something to think about. And they say using drugs without concern for other responsibilities can lead to other kinds of harms. I'm calling them medium-term harms, like fines or parent notifications or probation from their schooling or school-related activities, or maybe they'll be suspended or expelled or arrested. Okay, we're there. Here are some other points that they made, though, that I started scratching my head about. They have this idea that because they listed substances, and they listed the substances they say are the most problematic or dangerous, well, the idea is you can rank order types of substances a priori from least problematic to most for college students. Like substances have some moral value or not to them, or some danger value associated with them just by being the substances that they are.
Which Carl Hart objects to because Carl Hart feels, who makes up this list?
Right.
And he's critical of the old Drug Policy Alliance because they're people that come from a kind of a 60s hallucinogenic background. They're okay. Let's legalize them. Let's just penalize people who take crack or, methamphetamine. Right. They're the ones who are using the wrong drugs.
They go on to argue something like, because they have to reconcile, they listed Adderall as a drug to watch out for. And they have to reconcile that with the fact that Adderall is prescribed. And so they have to be kind to their doctor friends. So they say, using drugs as prescribed by your doctor, that's okay. Because your doctor's going to prescribe you something like the just clinical, just right dose for you based on your weight or body chemistry. So if you do it after you're prescribed by your doctor, that's okay. But if you use something like Adderall or other kinds of drugs recreationally, non-prescribed, then it's going to do something unexpected to you and to your brain chemistry. So, of course, that's
and of course, that includes opioids and benzodiazepines,
right,
which are prescribed drugs.
But Yeah, right. Opioids and benzodiazepines, for some reason, are easier to vilify. I don't know why, because people take them just as much. But Adderall, that's where they made the distinction, where they wanted to say, by the way, we know these are prescribed by doctors, and that's fine.
Because that's
Right,
that's a big college drug because people use it to help them
to study, right? And then they say that any of these problematic substances, which it, by the way, is alcohol, Adderall. This is what they listed: alcohol, Adderall, opiates, benzos, ecstasy, diet pills, and marijuana, can lead to stunted brain development. So as practical as they're trying to be, as you'll see later on, we can't sign on the dotted line for that way of thinking about the problem. Instead, here's what we might say. As far as substances having a value, well, we would say the value's neither negative or positive on their own. Just being a substance, that's nothing. And so the key is the way that a person uses the substances and how they balance their substance use with the other dimensions of their lives. Is the substance a life enhancer, or is the substance some sort of escape from life, or a soul way of generating something positive in your life?
They say
That
that, or
matters.
are you already throwing in your 2 cents?
This is our LPP reaction to the, this is our edit now. So I am the one saying that substances are neither positive or negative. This is the reaction to them saying that substances have a value in terms of their dangers that they present in life. We would say, as I think you already responded, drugs prescribed by a doctor, they're generally safe in as much as it's a reliable dose and they're not contaminated. You can be pretty sure, but no physician can prescribe some magical, just right dose of a drug. And whether you took a drug prescribed by a doctor or bought it from a friend, the onus is going to still be on the consumer of the drug to figure out the best setting and the consistency or cadence in which they take the drugs. And does that jibe with a balanced life?
Because they themselves keep saying things like, oh, they were prescribed opioids and then they became addicted.
Right.
There are, of course, stories like that with Adderall.
Our response to the brain development thing, brains will develop. I mean, that's just what I tell kids too. There are parents who come to me and ask, I feel so stupid and guilty because I've been letting my kid play video games and I've been letting them go on TikTok and all this crap. And just this year, I'm learning that it stunts their brain development. And I do say point blank, I don't try to be coy about it, but their brains are going to develop. And I say the same thing about drugs. If a person is ingesting so much of a drug that it's going to cause like a wet brain or an acute kind of damage, then we're not talking about brain development. We're talking about somebody who is dead set on being so destructive that they're going to harm themselves. It's like jumping off a bridge or something. But when using marijuana, opioids, ecstasies, and discovering that you'd like to use them more differently or less often, or that they're causing a problem in your life, no one needs to worry, well, is it just too late at this point? Is my brain changed yet? You know what I mean? It's a non-question for us. Brains will continue to develop, and there's mythology surrounding the idea that substances are rewiring your brain in a way that you can't get back from.
And we can prove it we often talk about people who naturally developed out of addiction, like Drew Barrymore, or we've recently discussed Robert Downey Jr. Nobody abused, we don't use that term, nobody misused drugs at an earlier age than Drew Barrymore. And now she's kind of a power player, a wisdom spouter. Robert Downey Jr. started taking marijuana when he was 7 and took the whole array of drugs through his 30s. And now he's one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world and generally regarded as one of the great actors and Hollywood success stories of our time. People develop throughout negative experiences of all sorts and are able to come out at the better end of that experience fully developed.
Our friend Johan Hari, I remember him saying he was invited to Peter Thiel's something. I don't know what it was. Some presentation that Peter Thiel was doing, and they were talking about addiction in the brain while they were there. And Han coming up with this thought, he was saying it just it irks me that people are talking about the brain in these complex equations. Like if you wanted to remake the movie Shakespeare, but you wanted to do it in brain neurological firing form, there's probably a way you could make true statements about what's going on in the Shakespeare story, but no one would understand it. You would be missing the point. Just like in life, if you ingest a drug, does something happen to your body and maybe your brain? Yeah, something probably happens. Does it matter? No, that's not the story. The story of someone's life is what's going on in their lives, not which neuron fired when. And there's no merit to the idea of like this halted development or brain damage, or that people need to relive a place in their development. It's nonsense. It doesn't map onto life.
Clients, don't waste your time worrying about what's happened to your brain up until now.
Right.
Let's worry about fully using the brain cells that you have abundantly present.
I think they wrote this article. Really, the article was supposed to be, if you use drugs in college, you probably need an off-ramp from that drug use. And so there's treatment options available. And I think that the filler was, here are some drugs and here are the dangers of these drugs. And I think that these were people that were just trying to do a service and look up some information about drugs. And I think they copied, pasted, so to speak. I don't think they plagiarized, but I think they they pulled from the lexicon of disease modeled people to put it in this mapping. So the kicker, the end, was supposed to be, here are some treatment options. Here's the decision you can make, because treatment while you're in college, those are two pretty intensive things. Well, you could do this treatment rehab and an outpatient form. You can even do intensive outpatient, and you just have to make sure that you're balancing your studies with this intensive outpatient, meaning you're going every day. Or you can do an evening intensive outpatient. It's almost like, just like you might say, well, you're in college, so you could get an evening job. You're saying you could do an evening intensive outpatient work, and then you could still study. We wouldn't say that. I mean, there might be people who run those programs who are super practical and we would agree with, but I don't think we agree with the facilitation of those programs. You can be your own person here, but Stanton, but I'm going to call it that. So the question is, okay, what if people take all of our points about just practically thinking about the use of drugs? How do I either take a drug or not, so that it maps on to what I want in life? All right, so people could get in the weeds with that, and maybe they're in trouble. So what would we say is the best route out of something destructive that you may have caused for yourself?
We would say fully participate in life. We would say, as opposed to recompensing for the disabilities you've created, engage fully in what lies ahead of you. We are the Life Process Program. We say, grab onto life and move forward, not look backwards about all of your disabilities and weaknesses and the crimes and problems you've created for yourself.
That's funny you'd say, engage in life. I made a bulleted list, and the first thing I wrote is participate in life. It was going to be the only thing I wrote, but I thought, maybe I need some talking points if I forget what I was going to say. When I wrote down, here's our edit, participate in life, decide what you value the most, incorporate your friends and family into your life, do what's needed to achieve the things you want to achieve. Consider how would a mature person incorporate drug use into their lives, or not use drugs, or set goals and work towards them, and decide whether or not, or to what extent, drugs and alcohol have a place in your life. If you feel like you need some extra assistance, professional help, or something like that, choose a person or a program that helps you with common sense aspects of life development, not programs that tell you you're diseased and you have to function differently, and that you uniquely, differently than other people, non-drug users, need to do this specific thing. And coincidentally, we have a program called the Life Process Program that tries to do that. We're probably not perfect. We can always improve, but at least we have the fundamental um, building blocks of life in mind while we're talking to people, and we don't judge them based on some come lately theory of disease or brain malfunction.
And what we're doing is we're translating Carl Hart's Beyond Harm Reduction. We're dealing with Marsha Rosenbaum's documents for old documents for Drug Policy Alliance, which is about working from knowledge. We're saying shift your entire focus. That's the fundamental thing. We're saying your focus needs to be on your life. We're not recovering from anything. We're going forward in life. It's a fundamental reconception. Drugs are one of many experiences in your life, positive and negative. And the goal is to solidify through contact with other human beings, through work, through health, through positive views of yourself, a positive lifestyle. And that's the only way of guaranteeing not only dealing successfully with past problems or current substance use, but also with just living a successful life. Let me throw one more vignette in here. I just caught, what can I tell you? It was late night TV on CBS. Norm O'Donnell was interviewing Bono. And Bono was sort of the model of a non-addicted musician. His work has always been about trying to improve life for people.
You said Bono, right?
Bono,
the U2 the guy? Yeah, okay. I just put it together. Sorry. Proceed.
And he's had the same group for 40 years. He started the same group in school of musicians. So U2 is that group. He's married to a woman that he met somewhere in school. They've been married 40 years. So Norah O'Donnell's interviewing him, and they make a few little jokes actually about drinking. And they're in the back of a pub. And his wife comes in, and she's famous for generally not wanting to be part of interviews. And she comes in and she sits down, and then the server comes in with 3 half pints of Guinness Stout, which is sort of the national drink of Ireland. And here they've been discussing Bono's humanitarian commitment, his commitment to music, his commitment to the fellow musicians on his team that have stayed together for almost a half a century, to his marriage that he talks about working on and how they had to create, a positive marriage. And then all 3 of them, and Norah O'Donnell's obviously some incredibly successful leading media person. And then I sort of thought it was against the law to show people actually drinking beer. All 3 of them take a long, delicious quaff. I swear to God, I thought, oh my God, I need a beer. And I'm thinking there's so much anti-alcohol. Of course, what have they just been talking about? They've been talking about Bono's efforts and success at trying to be a positive life force with the people he works with his family, with his commitment to helping Earth and environment and people. And then they have a beer.
You didn't think you could do that with a beer. And think if you made you want a beer, what about the kids?
I was thinking, oh, the people on Medium who were constantly arguing for people to quit drinking.
Right.
They're going to bring down the wrath on CBS.
So we had this public, what do you call it? This online publication, I guess, Intelligent. I'm sure they go scanning for programs that talk about drugs or addiction or whatever it is that they're writing about that day. And they sent us something that said, here, do you want to use this on your site? So we did a good natured thing by reading it, and I hope that they're not too upset with us, but we gave them some suggested edits for how a university student can use drugs successfully in their university career. Because as they say, why ignore the fact that drugs are ubiquitous, they're out there, and probably, there's a great chance that you, a college student, are going to drink or use drugs. It's a rite of passage.
And far as they themselves point out, far more college educated people drink alcohol than people without the advantages of education and income.
Right.
How is that? Why is it? And how do we help them? So it's a slight difference in perspective, but in a way, it's also a fundamentally different conception of our relationship to substances in the earth.
That's it for us today. Thanks again, Stanton, for indulging.
My pleasure. Great time.